Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Socratic Cinema. My name is Haleigh Phillips.
I'm James Delicio.
I'm Charlie Heatherly.
And I'm Kasey Clark.
And today we are reviewing The Irishman.
Ooh. Scorsese. Scorsese.
Scorsese.
Killed it, Kasey.
That's fine.
Let's talk about how we feel about The Irishman. Haleigh
Yes.
has a lot to say about The Irishman.
I do have a lot to say about The Irishman. So I started watching this by myself. Did a good 2 hours of it. And this movie is 3 hours long, as many.
3.5.
3.5.
Is.
Oh my gosh. This movie was hefty. I watched it in one day. And let me tell you the story.
Gross.
I watched the first 2 hours by myself, and I didn't understand any of it. It was slow, and I felt like my mind was zoning out during it. And I was like, I can't concentrate on anything because I'm so used to visual storytelling, and this whole movie is based on storytelling by dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's narrated by Robert De Niro. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
The
yes,
actor
yeah, you got
himself.
it. Yep.
Correct.
And it was hard for me to keep toned in. So after a while, my mom came home, and she was like, oh my gosh, The Irishman, I need to watch that. So I started it from the beginning with her.
Oh
you
my
didn't.
gosh.
I did.
What?
We started it from the
Oh
beginning.
my gosh.
And she's like, Haleigh, we have to watch this. And I was like, okay, I'll watch it with you. Because I got to a part where there was Little Italy, and she always told me little stories about how she used to work in Little Italy. And we're going through the whole podcast. And do you guys remember that scene where Joe Hoffa is waiting for Tiny in Florida?
Jim Hoffa.
Jim Hoffa.
Yes.
Hoffa.
Yeah.
I'll call him
Hoffa.
Hoffa.
Hoffa with an
Hoffa.
L.
Who's Tiny?
Hoffa.
Tiny's the guy that beat him up in the prison.
Tony.
Tony Pro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I call him Tiny.
Tony Pro. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Call him Tiny.
The tiny.
I only know the actor names and some of the character names.
Something
Tony
Graham.
Pro.
So
Tony
bear
Pro.
with me.
Yes.
Okay,
Oh,
Tony Pro.
God.
Yes, go on, go on.
So you guys remember that guy who was sitting across from him? Who was walked in with Tony?
Oh yeah.
The guy
fat?
with
The fat guy.
Yeah,
Yes,
fat
yeah,
Tony.
yeah, yeah.
He's an actual Gallo.
Oh wait, what?
He's an actual
so
Gallo.
he was
His
an
name
actual.
He's Patrick Gallo. And if you guys remember earlier, Joe Gallo in the beginning of the movie was the guy who pushed everyone's buttons because he was a big guy in Little Italy.
Yeah.
Oh.
And,
Crazy Joe Gallo.
And
Yeah.
Robert De
Got
Niro
shot.
shot him a bunch of times. That's an actual Gallo, and my mom went to school with him, so that's why I know that.
Wait, like literally went to school.
Went to
with
school
him.
with Patrick
Oh my
Gallo. She knew
gosh.
the Gallos, and she ate at Umberto's all the time. She was like, oh my gosh, my friend Gina always told me someone got shot there. And we were watching on the screen Joe Gallo get murdered outside Umberto's.
Oh
and she was
my
like,
goodness.
oh, that's cool.
That is crazy.
That's insane.
What I'm trying to get with this in my story is that when I started watching it by myself, I didn't get any of it. But after watching it with my mother and seeing her generational viewpoint of it, I think I understood the movie more. Because I think it appeals to a certain generation and a certain, like, how you grow up.
Yeah,
like,
it's
I
not
feel like
us.
for us in the West Coast, we don't grow up with mafia life or hear about this stuff that often.
Mhm.
But I feel like people who grew up in the East Coast and hear about all these things and know people and see people who paint houses, as Robert De Niro, that's how he got it started in it.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
saw people who did it. I think it appeals to them way more, and seeing the long, fleshed out version of the memoir would be much more appealing to them, and why I think
That's a very good point.
Scorsese
Yeah.
fleshed out this movie so much.
It almost reminds me of like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Like these movies were
Yeah.
not made for our generation. This is very much an older story. I always feel like I get a little history lesson when I watch Scorsese movies. But to me, something about The Irishman was so much more. I felt a lot more able to follow the plot of The Irishman.
Then what?
Than other Scorsese movies.
Okay.
Like Goodfellas and Casino, I just kind of get lost in it a little bit. But The Irishman, something about it, it was easier for me to like track and keep track of where everyone was and what's going on. And I understood the story, and it felt like Irishman had more of a clear story arc than his other movies to me. It was very clear, like, this is the story of Frank something and
Sheeran.
Frank Sheeran, Ed Sheeran's older brother, Frank Sheeran and Jim Hoffa. And it was like, this is their story. It's very clear.
Russell.
And I understood it pretty well, I think. I was very surprised that, like, oh, I'm actually getting this movie. I also have a little bit of a personal connection to the movie as well, Haleigh.
Whoa.
So part of the whole movie is they're going to Detroit, and Frank meets Jim Hoffa. Frank is going to go meet Jim Hoffa at this restaurant in Detroit, and that's where Hoffa disappears. They take him away and they kill him after they meet at the restaurant in like the climax of the movie. My dad grew up right next to that, like real close to that restaurant in Detroit, and so he said when he was little, with his buds, they would always see that restaurant, and it's like, that's where Jim Hoffa disappeared. And it's like,
whoa.
It's the climax of the movie. It was so. It's so weird to me that this is all like real life. Like this is real stuff that happened, and like our parents know about it, and like this is just part. It's like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The Manson murders, like, was a thing that just like everyone. It's just so weird to me that this is all real life. Like this all happened, and it affected the lives of people that we know. It's so bizarre.
For sure. And you two have completely shifted what I was going to say about this movie as my opener, because I was going to say all these things, and then you brought some, or both you really shifted my perspective on this. It's definitely not a movie made for our generation, and I think that's a great point to make, because I have seen Goodfellas and I've seen Godfathers 1 and 2, and for some reason I think they're good movies, but they were never like great movies to me. Like, I never watched them and was like, this is an instant classic. And I think it might be a little bit because of that. Like, I haven't grown up with those stories, and I haven't lived through those lessons that these guys have been learning, and I haven't been in that world before. So it still seems, I mean, like you said, it's crazy to think this all happened. To other people, that was a thing. Like, we glorify mobsters and tell stories about them, and to us who have never lived with mobsters before, it's sort of a mythic idea.
Yes.
Right? So when I saw this story, I treated it as like sort of a fictional piece, unconsciously or not. I was like, oh, I know, although I knew it was a real thing, I was like, I don't really have any connection to this. It was like watching a more realistic version of Star Wars, basically. Like, this is all fiction, this is a story being told to me that had no real world equivalent, right?
Gotcha.
So when I was watching it, I felt like it did that very wrongly. It went on for way too long. It was not concise. I really got lost in the sauce, like, multiple times. I cannot tell you the plot of that movie. I cannot tell you many character names. I know there were actors in the movie that I remember and who did a great job acting. It was shot beautifully. I can tell you all these things about it. I can't tell you about the movie as a whole. And I think it has something to do with that. And I think I'm the wrong person to really dive in depth about this. So I'm going to try for this episode and really see all these different perspectives on the movie and try and figure out. I'm just going to try and make sense of what I watched, basically.
It's a lot to digest, and it is a very long 3.5 hours. Is, I'd say no movie needs to be 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
I watched this movie over 2 nights, and I kind of split it in my brain into 2 separate stories. The first night, I watched the first hour and a half, and to me that was the Jim Hoffa versus the Kennedys story.
Yeah.
And then the next night I watched the Jim Hoffa versus Tony Pro story. And that sort of is how I compartmentalized the movie, and that's how I keep track of it. And to me, watching it over 2 nights, I think, made me like it a lot more than if I watched it all in one day. I think that's a big part of why it worked with me so well, is because I broke it up into little pieces that I could understand one at a time, and then when I step back and look at it, it makes sense as a whole.
Yeah.
And before we go any, I have a point I want to make about that in a way that I would revise the presentation of it in order for it to be more digestible. But let's let Kasey talk first.
What did you think about the movie?
Yeah, what did you
Kasey?
think?
Kasey, what'd you think?
Tell us.
I liked it. I'm not really into mobster movies that much, so I haven't really like seen the classics, mostly because they are really long and it wasn't something that my parents would really like put on. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. Like Haleigh said, I watched it alone, but I did split it. I split it up over 2 days because ain't no way I'm getting through that 3.5 hours. And it was easier to understand splitting it up, but I did have to do like a lot of research. like afterwards to make it make sense, because I had actually weird like fact is that I had watched like it's like a BuzzFeed Unsolved thing. I don't know. if
yeah.
Was it
it's-
about
on
the...
Hoffa?
Yeah, on Hoffa.
No.
Like,
Oh
if you,
my-
like, and it was like a few years ago, and I was like watching the movie. I'm like, these names sound familiar. And then when I was doing my research, like it popped. It was like, I'll watch again. It's like I knew it. I knew I watched it. This all
Oh
makes
my gosh,
sense.
That's too good.
Yeah. So then you liked the movie.
Yeah,
Oh, you had to wrestle with that
See,
one.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I'm with you. It's a good movie technically.
yes.
It didn't hit home for me. Does that mean it's a bad movie? No. Does that mean that I was not the biggest fan of it? Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why you wouldn't. You have to be like in the mood to watch this kind of movie, and you have to go into it with a mindset ready to be confused. You have to
Yeah.
think hard while watching this
Yeah,
Martin
you do.
Scorsese movie.
Like to
Because-
keep it all together.
and they have so many people in them, and they all just have like, it's easy to remember names like Han Solo and Luke Skywalker. It's harder to remember names like Frank Sheeran and Tony Pro. It's like, these are just normal, these are human names. It's like, it's a lot
These are
harder to keep
human
human names straight.
Yeah.
Just because there's so many people in it. Like, I'm trying to remember the names of any characters from Casino.
But do you think he was trying to make a point with that?
What do you mean?
What do you, explain.
Like, he spread out this whole movie throughout 3 hours to really show how big the mafia is, but how insignificant each one can be.
Yeah, it's very
how expendable they are.
it's a
Right.
very big spider web, and like,
Oh.
I think it's really, hot take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there you
Hot
go.
take, hot take.
And like the movies, his Martin Scorsese movies always feel to me like you see these characters, so many characters introduced, and it's like, okay, they're tiny. I don't have to remember this. I'm gonna focus on the main characters, and then they wind up being like the key to the puzzle. And it's
Right.
like, it just shows how intertwined everything is in the mafia.
Yeah, like Sally. Well, like Sally.
Bugs, yeah, I was
Who
gonna say
you
that.
see, like he's like name dropped in the beginning for strangling some dude.
Oh, and he winds up being like one of the biggest players at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He gets shot in the.
Who I think Sally Bugs is the actor who played Sally Bugs is he's in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. He's Gideon.
There's
I-
so many actors in this.
Yeah. I was very
Oh.
pleasantly surprised that Joe Pesci doesn't play angry gangster in this movie, because in every other Martin Scorsese movie, Joe Pesci plays angry gangster. And it's finally different. Like, Pesci's not the hot-headed one in this movie.
Russell.
He's like cool. Russell's
Wait,
cool and
okay,
collected
thank
and
God. I was like-
a family man. And I love one of my favorite parts about these kinds of movies is seeing how like these hardened criminal guys like try and interact with their families. That's one of my favorite
Yeah.
parts of these movies.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a great dynamic.
Yeah.
Like to them, this is just their job. Like, they're still family men at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because that is just such an impactful contrast. I mean, like, it shows how people are capable of such great violence, but also love at the same time. And you're right. Like, Joe Pesci's finally playing a non-angry person. Poor Al Pacino. He got typecast again. But Al Pacino as angry Al Pacino is best Al Pacino.
Yeah,
Because
of course.
in Scarface he's great. In every other Al Pacino movie he's great. In Alvin and the Chipmunks 2, he's fantastic.
Wow.
Is that the Alvin and the Chipmunks movie he was in? He was in one of them.
Yes.
I think
I'm not
think
sure.
So.
Shipwrecked or Shipwrecked or something.
Oh yeah, it's like
Shipwrecked
the
is
one.
the second one.
So
Yeah.
then yes, he was in that movie, but it was a very good film, and it's just, I mean, like you said, a great contrast between love and such a deep hate. And Joe Pesci really played that well, especially when Sheeran's daughter
Peggy.
she was not living for him.
No. She was
Honestly,
not.
I wish in a movie as long as this, I wish more time was given to Peggy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really wanted more from her. Rogue from X-Men, shout out.
Yeah.
I forgot her name, but I saw her face and she has such a recognizable face. Like, I saw her and instantly I was like, oh, it's Rogue.
I didn't recognize it. I'm sorry.
Aw,
It's just us.
Let's
It's
go,
okay.
Casey. I wanted more from her, though. I wish we got to see more of that. But I mean, I think what they gave us was good, but
Yeah.
interesting that she loves. She had such a connection with Hoffa though. That was really
Yeah, why exactly?
because he was the union leader, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. So she was able to rationalize.
And she was like, "Oh, he's giving people jobs," but like, no, he's just as criminal as the rest of them.
Yeah.
he's like one of the only ones who went to jail.
I mean, this movie's very complex in that regard, where it looks at different levels of criminality, it looks at different levels of humanity, and it sort of mixes them all together. And this movie would honestly take a couple rewatches to fully get
Absolutely.
everything that's in it.
Yeah, I think that first hour and a half rewatching it explained a lot to me. Even though it was arduous, it helped a lot.
I love how political the movie is too. Like
with the cannon.
this is like one of the first times that I've seen because I mean the mafia controlled a lot. Like they were powerful for a very long time. And this is probably one of the first movies I've seen to really get into that angle. Like, you know, in Goodfellas you see, no one messes with them. The mafia is powerful. But now it's like, no, they have influence in presidential elections. Like the mafia is powerful. And I loved getting the political aspect of it and the legal aspect as well. I love like legal movies, like Dark Waters was amazing.
Dark Waters is fantastic.
And I love getting hints of that in this one. It's like the mafia is a business, like it's a corporation. It was so fascinating to get that angle.
Although I think the movie's presented well, and I think the movie has its strengths in its structure, I think there was a better way to showcase this grand opera of a story that is the rise and fall of Jimmy Hoffa as portrayed through Sheeran's eyes. And I think it would have been better, especially because it's on Netflix, as a television series. Now, there is an argument to be made that the current way and the best way to watch Irishman, and the way that it was intended because it's on Netflix, is a two-parter. As you said, James, that's probably the best way to watch it, is to split the movie into its two main arcs on the rise and fall of Hoffa, right? But I think, and this has worked before with the Sopranos and other gangster television shows, these types of stories, these types of politically driven stories work incredibly well in an episodic format. And I think personally that would have helped me understand all of these characters and really get to know them as opposed to having them thrown at me and then I get information overload when I'm watching.
Yeah. It's a movie you have to take it slow with. You have to really like simmer with each scene and like, okay, which characters are here? What do they? I had to remind myself a lot, like, who's on whose side? What do they want here? Like, what am I seeing here? Because it's so easy to get lost in all the little alliances that are made and then broken, and then he betrays this guy. It's like, because for most of the movie, Frank and Jimmy were like buds, but then now Jimmy's going to kill Hoffa. Why is that? Or sorry, Frank's going to kill Hoffa. It's like, why? It's like,
Jimmy's gonna kill himself.
It's like why is this happening? You have to be very careful keeping track of it all, or else it won't make any sense, and you're probably gonna have a bad time with it. I wanted to point out something. I'm forgetting.
Just something, anything.
Sorry, go ahead, Kasey.
First he deletes an episode, and now he can't remember anyone's
I'm
names.
on the opposite of a roll. Go ahead, Haleigh.
Are you sure? You don't want to point?
No, I got it. I'm hanging
He's
on.
rolling uphill right now. Gravity has stopped working.
Yeah.
I wanted to agree. The movie, I felt it had a lot of different feelings. I think it was trying to go for different things in its storytelling. Because, one, you have the car ride to the wedding. And then you also have him in his wheelchair telling you a story. And then you have flashbacks to before the wedding. So I felt like there was three different ways that the story was being told. And I think that added to a little bit of the confusion. Just from like a storytelling point of view, I felt like there should have been one thing like that we were connecting to.
Yeah, and that's how a lot of Scorsese movies are. They kind of hop timelines around a lot, like going forward and backward in the future. Which
Especially Godfather 2.
Oh, yeah. It's very hard to keep track of that sometimes. Yeah, but it's like there's 3 different tracks of time that we're following at once.
And it crosses.
And and then the past catches up to the wedding timeline, and then the wedding catches up. It's all very satisfying when it comes together.
Right.
I live for the Scorsese scenes where everyone finally gets their comeuppance. You know, and there's that whole montage where it's like, and then they got this guy, and then the feds busted this guy, and
Yeah.
he went to jail, and
Yeah.
it's like that scene in I think my favorite way I've seen that done is in Casino. It's set to House of the Rising Sun, and it's just you get the montage of everyone's like going to the slammer, and it's just like everyone's getting caught, and it all falls apart. I love that. There's always that scene in the Scorsese movie where everything goes wrong, and they get what they deserve, and it's like a montage, and it's just as good in The Irishman. Still great. Keep on doing what you're doing, Martin.
I felt like the note at the end, though, when everything was done and everyone was in jail, lasted for a really long time.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
This is what I wanted to
Yeah.
talk about. I disagree. I am very happy
Schnapple.
that for once, I feel like, when you look at the structure, the traditional like beginning, rising action, climax, falling action, no one ever gives any time to the falling action. It's always climax, and the movie ends 10 minutes later. For this, after Hoffa gets killed, that's the climax of the movie. There are I have to check on the Netflix time bar. You get 40 minutes of falling action.
No.
And
Yes.
I loved it.
Yes.
It's like
Gross.
It's like they finally. I was so happy. It's like, yes, you're giving me time to like
Sink
what
in
happened.
what happened.
Yeah, what happened, how it affected. They really dug in with the falling action, and I appreciated it so much. I think it's just because I got to see like.
See, I was vibing with you. I was like, no, that's yeah. And then you said 40 minutes, and I was like, no.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think 20 to 30 is probably
Yeah.
like
yeah.
that is stretching the limits of how of like peak denouement. That's like stretching how good you can make that falling action.
Yeah.
Like, it just this is my problem with Scorsese movies is it feels like he's a really fantastic filmmaker, but he's really fantastic for 5 minutes too long. It's an excess
Yes.
of fantastic filmmaking.
Yes.
And although that doesn't sound like a bad thing, it's just I'm getting so much and I'm having so many complex I mean, like as you said, Haleigh, there's 3 different storylines going on. And that's super interesting and that's adding layers of meaning and depth, but that's like I'm watching a movie as I'm trying to decipher that and I have to keep it all straight.
I agree. 'Cause you have a lot of visually going on as well as the dialogue. Like there's that I love this one shot where it's actually the only part I think there's no real dialogue. It's these 2 mafia men, they're just walking in a hallway. And then they go into a barber shop, it keeps moving forward and then it just stays on flowers. It stays on the flowers and boom, 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 you hear gunshots and screams.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
staying on the flowers.
Yeah.
And it's just like, here's something nice to look at while this is happening. But I think if there was more moments of that where what happened was breathed instead of narrated with the visual storytelling, I think it would have been more easy to
Yes.
comprehend.
Like show don't tell is a common writing rule, and this movie does a lot of tell.
Yes.
It does so much telling.
It does show and tell. It does both.
it does. Yes. Yeah.
It does
throws
both
stuff at
in
you.
a masterful way, but it's showing you in a way that it's showing you in multiple ways.
It shows you in a way that's a lot like telling. But I mean, I guess part of the reason that the 40-minute falling action can be justified is that the whole movie is. I mean, they took the average 2-hour movie structure and multiplied it by 1.5.
Yeah.
So it's got an extra hour to work with. It makes sense that they can stretch everything out a little bit, I guess. Like, what else would they have filled the space with? More gangsterizing action?
I mean,
we already had so much of that.
I mean, you're right. Like, structurally, that is the right choice to make with the rest of the film. Do I agree that the rest of the film should have been that long and dense?
Yeah.
No.
Might as well. I think it...
It's like watching Rise of Skywalker times 0.5. Or times 1.5.
Or, like, yeah, take a
It's
movie...
like that much information coming at you constantly.
Take a movie that's already chock full, like Endgame, and then imagine another hour on it. It's like, ugh.
And Scorsese is a little bit of an artisan with his movies, and he has all these opinions on the Marvel movies. That I really
he
don't agree
hates
with.
the Marvel movies.
He doesn't think they're art. He thinks that they're basically theme parks, and I think that he's a little full of himself.
Whoa.
Yeah, because
Hot take.
this is a universal thing that I have, and I hate it when people disrespect other people's views on what art is because they think that their form of art is higher.
Right.
And Scorsese, he's a great filmmaker. He has the authority to have these opinions, but I don't agree with him. There's multiple ways to tell a story that are entertaining, and he has found his own way to tell that. would that work for an Avengers style thing? No. Does another form of entertainment that he might find not as chock full of information as his work? Yes. It's different ways to go about entertainment, and he needs to understand that those are both valid things. Like, the only reason I'm so mad is because I love James Gunn. And
Yes.
and James Gunn was particularly peeved off because he loved Scorsese his entire life, and Scorsese inspired him to become a director. And then when you have your hero saying to you, I think that your movies aren't art, it's a theme park attraction, like, screw you, dude.
And I read that statement too, and I was angry. I was like, no, you can't criticize, art's subjective. But at the same time, part of me feels like Marvel needs to bring in more fresh blood like Taika Waititi and James Gunn. Like,
And they're doing it.
they're doing it. I just think, gosh, there are so many Marvel movies that all look the same and are shot the same, and it's the same aesthetic. And then you get the gems like the James Gunn movies and the Taika Waititi movies, and it's like, yes, this is fresh, this is different. These feel like independent movies to me. I just think Marvel needs to mix it up. There's very much, you can tell when a movie is Marvel just by the way it's shot and the way it's color corrected. Like,
For sure.
they have their style, but it's just we've just seen it so much. I hope going forward Marvel starts mixing it up. Like, Edgar Wright produced Ant-Man, and you can hardly tell it's an Edgar Wright movie. Like, one of the most distinctive directors was completely, like, muted by Marvel. And it's just, like, it's a little bit frustrating to me, I guess.
Well, I mean, he wasn't a director on the movie, so that's why.
But producer, right? That his job is to bring the director's
Sure.
vision to life.
Sure. I feel like if he was director, he would have...
It probably would have shown through a little
It would have
more.
been a much different movie if he was the director of it. In every Marvel movie, and I can say this with confidence, I've come out enjoying.
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed them.
There's not a single Marvel movie that I've been like, oh, that's not very interesting, or I didn't like that.
I think we're all forgetting about the existence of Thor: The Dark World.
Yeah.
Even that, when I first saw it, when I was
The
like
most-
7 or whatever, I was like, that was awesome. Norse gods, yeah.
Yeah. This bad guy. Does anyone even remember his name?
Malekith.
Maliki.
Am I the only one who forgot? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we had it, Kasey.
That's
We-
embarrassing.
Pretty quickly. Yeah, let's go. Yeah, but
You guys can high five. I mean, it's okay.
Oh.
no. We're just gonna do silent high fives, James,
It
because
was
we
the
don't want to
most
screw.
ginger high five I've ever seen.
Ginger? Are you using ginger as a slur? As a
As in-
slur?
Oh
You just.
my God.
As in, your
What?
hands made contact gingerly.
He's
in
racist,
a
everyone.
gingerly fashion.
I have never been this discriminated against as a white ginger man before.
I need you to read a dictionary.
This is. I can't believe this. And the word is gingerly, James. It's gingerly. It's an ad. I'm not sure if it's an adverb. No, it's an adverb.
That's
it's
an adverb. Yeah, that's an
Which can
adverb.
modify what, everyone? What are the 3 things adverbs can modify? We're turning this into
verbs.
yes. Adjectives.
They can modify.
Other adverbs. Yes. He very quickly ran down the hall. I very quickly lifted my fist.
Oh,
and punched you
very,
in the
because
face.
Anyways.
is very an adverb?
Yes.
He swam. Oh yeah, huh?
Very quickly.
It's like an emphasizer.
Mhm.
It needs to be its own class of word.
Super besides the point. Scorsese's a great filmmaker, and Irishman was a great film. I think it was a little self-indulgent.
Yeah, it didn't.
Yeah.
It could have been cut down or split into 2 movies or made into a miniseries or something. But then it wouldn't be in the running for any Oscars. Think of the Oscars.
Okay, do you know what Irishman is nominated for that you wouldn't expect it to be nominated?
Wait, have the nominations come out?
Emmys. Emmys have.
Oh,
Oh.
I feel like
Or-
it's gonna
or,
be like
sorry, not
costume
Emmys,
design.
Golden
Golden
Globes.
Golden
okay,
Globes
okay.
are next week.
Gotcha.
What? There's a category that they were nominated for that I completely forgot, and that's visual effects. They de-aged
Oh.
Robert De Niro.
Oh my
for,
gosh,
like,
yeah.
half the movie.
And Joe Pesci.
Yes.
Seamless,
Oh, they look
absolutely
good.
seamless.
Joe
They
Pesci,
look
like,
good.
he got old too. Like,
Yeah.
there was some serious work to be done there.
I couldn't tell the difference. Like,
Well, okay, I could tell the difference
okay,
with Joe Pesci.
Between old and young Pesci, I could tell the difference, but I couldn't. Like, if you told me that I didn't know who Joe Pesci was, you told me that was a different actor, I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah, Robert De Niro. Yeah, the young Joe Pesci in Irishman doesn't look like actual young Joe Pesci. It looks like a younger version of old Joe
Joe
Pesci.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is I mean that gets the effect across just the same. But Robert De Niro's de-aging was seamless.
was.
That was so impressive
So
to
good.
me.
He looks so.
Yeah, huh? Did you guys know there was an Oscar for best movie title once? Like
Really?
it used to be a thing. The
Could
best.
you imagine?
Type.
What? I like
You
all-
know-
I think the
you know-
Rise of Skywalker.
You know, we're not
Wait,
gonna
wait, wait.
we're not gonna get into it. Not gonna get into it. Oh man.
Also, can I, just a little pet peeve. Why did they have Robert De Niro play the Irish guy? Is Robert De Niro Irish?
No, he's
No, he's Italian,
Italian.
right? What? Like what? Like why? Like why? Like
Why?
why?
Thank you for that. We're having so much fun all having our own microphones now. It's a whole new world. A whole Oh, we have to talk about the new Mulan movie when it comes out. That's going back to our roots.
Yes.
We started with Disney
Yes.
remakes.
I think
Yes.
it could be the best Disney remake from the trailers.
Oh yeah,
It looks
I
I'm
can
real
agree.
good.
absolutely looks stellar.
Also, we couldn't have Mushu, but we have a witch.
The witch
Yeah.
is the you remember his bird? That the falcon that's the
Dead.
it's
Oh!
it's the bird.
I still don't. I think that's a dumb addition to the movie.
I didn't I don't know. We're just gonna have to see how it
I
comes out in the
know.
The
movie.
general dude.
Obviously, all these opinions are based on the trailers and do not reflect our opinions of the movie. But it's dumb. So far, I think it's sort of a dumb thing. That they
Just the
have.
witch lady.
Yeah, shape change. Like,
Is she a shapeshifter?
Yeah,
Yeah, she changes into the
she's
hawk.
a wit. Like she's a magician.
You can see
she does,
that
like
The thingy.
Yeah.
with the
Oh, I
hand.
thought they were just calling.
They always have this character in Disney movies that they try
I
to make
thought they were just
realistic.
calling her a witch, and
No.
she just had like cool martial
She's
arts moves.
actually
no,
a
she's
witch.
actually a witch.
I don't know
Oh,
why
that's
they
not
keep
as
putting these
good.
characters in realistic Disney movies where they're like, oh, but by the way, the one magic person. It's like, why? Stop. Just-
Exactly,
You had
because
it.
it was this whole. This is a complete sidebar.
Yeah, and
but
that
it
was my favorite part of The Irishman.
When Mushu showed up.
And then Eddie Murphy starts cracking jokes while Jim Hoffa gets murked.
Oh, speaking of that, so we know that The Irishman is based on the confession of what's his face?
Frank
Of-
Sheeran?
Of Frank Sheeran.
Yes, we
But-
did know that.
It's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
But
Well, yeah, the interviewer
the
guys come up
case
to him.
is no. I mean,
Casey's
this
trying to talk.
this whole story.
I'm
is-
bullying Charlie.
We're sorry.
is told from the like all of the scenes of him old is told from the is like the cameras, the perspective of Chris Brandt, the person who wrote.
No way.
Yeah,
From
that's
his
why you
perspective?
see. Yeah, that's why you see him walking, like in the opening scene, and then he
Oh,
sits down in
that
front
Yeah,
of him.
I was gonna
And so all
say,
of them-
like, because I was gonna say the shots where Robert De Niro's old, they look like you ever watch a documentary and there's like those interview sequences.
yeah.
they're shot like he's in an interview.
Yeah.
And I think, and you hit it out of the park with that. So many hot takes coming out this episode.
Oh my gosh.
We're on our A game, and we were
Yeah.
worried about this episode.
Yeah.
We were like, gosh, what are we gonna say about the Irishman? It was just so long. Here we are talking about Mulan instead.
Yeah, no, that was our workaround.
Yes.
Honestly.
Yeah, we
That
do.
was our
It's our
segment.
specialty.
Oh, I wanted to bring up something.
Yes.
I
Yes.
scared James, but
No, I'm excited.
Do it. Tell us.
So, what did you guys think of the part where if a new character was introduced, it paused and showed when they died and how they died?
Oh,
I
I
thought
love
that was brilliant.
Sick.
Yeah,
Cool.
I
he
was
does.
like,
It's like
that
shot
was
in the face
8
7
times
times.
in
Yeah.
a parking lot.
Scorsese loves his
Oh,
titles, and I
that's
love his
so
titles
good.
too.
So
So good.
And
and
it's
then some
also-
of them we got to see them get
Yeah.
shot in the
Yeah,
face.
I was like, I
8
remember when it
times.
said
It's also
that.
so funny. Like whenever I'm editing a video and I need to put in titles, I get so self-conscious about my font choice. You know, it's like, oh gosh, this looks so unprofessional. This looks like Microsoft Word. And then Scorsese comes in and it's just like Arial, sans serif, default, titles,
And it
deal.
worked.
And I was like, yes, perfect. Right? But then when I put Arial, it's unprofessional. I need to go to dafont.com and get a new font. Gosh, he's so unashamed. Titles are the most underused parts of movies, and people need to
Yes.
more love for movie titles.
Yes.
Not the name of the movie, but the
Right.
the font.
the text, the font.
Yeah.
James Gunn does that well.
Yes, he does.
Robert De Niro. I mean, sorry. No, Scorsese. He's the one I hate.
I was like, wait.
Screw you, Robert De Niro. No, I
what-
like Robert De Niro.
what-
He's cool.
Love Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro's a cool
He's
guy.
a good lad.
Good lad.
A jolly good Irishman. He's Irish.
That was a good accent, James.
Thank you.
Okay,
I
let's
tried.
all go around the table and do our Irish accents.
Oh,
No,
Oh,
thank you.
give your what are we giving the Irishman out of 10? What's our Socratic rating?
Ooh.
I think
Leave
it's
me for last.
I will. Who will go first? Well, Charlie wants to go
James.
last, so it's either. Yeah, I'll go first. Fine.
Oh, that was.
Casey's a little congested. Everybody.
We're all
Sorry.
congested.
That helps the podcast
I
voice.
just,
If your voice is like a little
snorted.
bit rugged.
I know, my monologue in the beginning, I'm sorry for everyone who had to hear me.
I give the Irishman. I give the first half of the.
No.
No.
You have to
No.
use a whole. You can't-
Holistically.
As a whole, I mean,
Yeah, holistically.
There's
There's
not-
an SAT vocab.
Hey,
Lit,
see, I'm
yeah.
smart. I'm
there's
smart.
there's not a ton that I didn't like about the movie. I'm gonna
Oh,
give it.
Thank you.
Ready?
It's okay.
Drum roll, please. Don't. No, please. That would have been really bad. I realized what I said, and the microphones were about to explode.
The realization.
I think I'm gonna say an 8. A very
An inoffensive 8.
a subtle, the gentleman's 8 out of 10.
Gentleman's eight.
It earns a gentleman's 8 from me.
Haleigh?
Haleigh, Miss.
I feel
Phillips?
the 8. I can't give it a 7 because I know it
It's too
aids a whole.
masterful for that.
It is masterful. It's masterful in its own way, and I don't think it was good enough to get a 9 just because the way it was structured to me, holistically. I feel an 8. I feel the gentleman's 8.
The gentleman's 8. Once again, Casey.
I would say it's a gentleman's 9 with context.
With context.
With context.
With context.
Okay, let's hear the context.
All right. Well, the context is just like knowing, just like a basis of knowing what's going on. Because if you don't know what's going on, especially in the first hour and a half to like hour and 40
Yeah, like
minutes.
an hour and 48 minutes.
Yeah, like when he's like basically like his ascension into the mafia people, where he's starting to get like close with Russell. If you don't know, then you don't know what's
Yeah,
going on.
if you don't have that figured out, the rest of the movies, you're kind of out of luck.
Yeah,
And that gave it a 9.
And that gave
Yeah.
it a 9 because you got it.
You
yeah.
got it?
Okay.
9 because she understood the plot.
Boom.
Boom. Take
The
that.
bar low.
Nah. All right, Charlie.
Okay. Well, what a situation I have myself in. I would say,
Oh boy.
well,
He's like a 5.
hold on. I give average movies, and I mean very average movies, 5s. Hold on.
Uh-oh.
The Irishman's not an average movie. The Irishman does things very, very well, and that's acting. It shoots itself very well. It has great music, subtle, plays. It plays to the emotion of the film quite well. And I think for those reasons, if I was to grade it structurally besides story, it would be a 10 out of 10. Whoa. That was like 75% of what I was saying.
Okay.
But the story is a thing. It's presented in a way that I think is far too long, far too complicated for a movie that I'm expected to absorb for 3.5 hours straight and make sense of. And I also feel like emotionally, I personally did not really care too much about a whole lot that was going on.
He did not vibe.
I wasn't vibing with it, so I think for that I would have to give it an 8 as well. Perhaps for different reasons than you guys gave it an 8.
But is it the gentleman's 8?
Exactly.
It's a gentleman's 8. It's a respectable 8. It's an 8 with an asterisk. I think
It's a
It's an 8 with an attitude.
yeah, it's an 8 with an attitude. It's a sassy 8.
It's a team.
Scorsese, get your attitude in
It's a
check.
spicy 8.
Spicy 8.
Oh my god.
So the verdict is The Irishman,
8.25.
8.25. Watch it. Watch it over 2 days.
Yes.
That's the catch.
Don't do what I did.
Yeah, watch some
Don't
other
be
movies first
Haleigh.
and then
Don't
watch
be mean.
Irishman.
Split Irishman at around the point where the Kennedys where JFK gets assassinated.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Oh my gosh, James.
Spoiler
Stop
alert.
it. Right.
History spoiler, in case you haven't got that far yet. Well,
Before we go,
Oh,
before we go.
Before we go.
before we go.
how do we think Jimmy Hoffa actually died? Because it's still an open case.
Wait, so they... Wait.
Huh?
Fill me in.
Yeah,
So-
it is.
So
Thank
it's an
you,
open
Alex.
case. So that was a fictional part of the movie.
No, he did confess, like, on his deathbed, he confessed to killing Jimmy Hoffa it was like a week or so before he died.
But they don't know if he was telling the truth.
Yeah. And from a few other, maybe 4 other people have
contradicted his story.
Or have also confessed to killing. Well,
him.
are they people like Sal, what's his
Sally
name?
Bugs?
Sally Bugs.
No, it was it's
Tony.
he was called the Iceman. He was like a serial killer, and he said I iced Hoffa or something, and he put him in a car and scrapped
so a
him
lot
and
of people
sent him.
have confessed.
Yeah. So
I trust Sheeran the most out of all of them.
Yeah, I trust the man who got a movie made about it. So try again, Iceman.
He paints houses. What do? You ice people.
Is the Iceman still alive?
The Iceman is actually an X-Men. He dated. Who did he date? Kitty Pryde or Rogue?
Rogue.
Okay.
Did he date
He
Rogue?
dated Peggy.
He dated
That's
Peggy.
why Peggy's
Oh my
crossover.
gosh! It all wraps together.
Anyways, we've been
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Socratic Cinema.
That was the hottest take about the hottest
Wow.
movie with the hottest people. Socratic Cinema. Check us out on. I almost forgot. Thank you
us out
so
on
much for
everything.
listening, everybody. Check us out on all of our platforms. We have a great nice little log of episodes for you to listen to. At least somewhere around 13 or 14, somewhere in there.
We getting there.
Go check them out. There, we hope you have enjoyed the episode. Thank you again for listening. Check us out on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Instagram.
Twitter.
Hopefully.
I mean, you can follow our Twitter. I don't know.
know if
You're
you'll
not going
see
to find
anything.
anything.
Just give us clout.
But yeah, tell your friends. Tell all of your podcast-loving amigos about your good friends at Socratic Cinema. And with that, we are out of here.
Adios.